My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 62, living in Naperville, Illinois. For 34 years, I trusted my husband Daniel with everything: our finances, my medical care, even sorting my Medicare papers when I got confused. 115 A.M. O'Hare Airport. I'm holding Daniel's wallet. My husband forgot it rushing to catch his emergency business flight to Chicago. Mrs. Parker, the driver says, suddenly locking all the doors. Please don't get out of this car. What? I need to bring this to my husband at his gate. His eyes find mine in the rearview mirror, filled with fear. Trust me, 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. I grip the leather wallet tighter. In 34 years of marriage, Daniel's never forgotten his wallet before. Why can't I? Because there's a man behind that concrete pillar waiting to hurt you. My blood turns cold. Then the police cars arrive. 3 of them, surrounding us with flashing lights. They drag someone out: zip ties, chloroform, a detailed plan to make my death look like a mugging. But the real shock comes when the driver shows me his phone. Security footage from downtown. There's Daniel, not on any plane to Chicago. In a hotel lobby with a woman in a red coat, checking his watch like he's waiting for news. My husband had been forging my signatures for months. Creating fake medical records. Buying life insurance policies worth millions. All while telling me I was getting forgetful. Daniel wasn't on a business trip. He was creating an alibi. While someone else was supposed to kill me in this parking lot. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. The kitchen clock read 12:15 a.m., and Evelyn Parker sat alone at her dining table in Naperville, Illinois. The house felt bigger when Daniel wasn't home. Every creak of the floorboards seemed louder. Every tick of the grandfather clock echoed through rooms that held too much silence for a woman of 62. She pressed her fingertips against her temples. The Medicare explanation of benefits lay spread before her like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Numbers that didn't make sense. Deductibles that seemed to grow each month. She told herself it was just the insurance company being complicated. Nothing more. Her pill organizer sat beside the paper's 7 small compartments for 7 days. Monday through Sunday, each filled with the white and blue tablets that kept her blood pressure steady and her cholesterol in check. Daniel always helped her fill it. He said she forgot things sometimes. Maybe she did. The front door opened with a soft whoosh of cold air. Daniel's footsteps hurried across the hardwood floor, urgent but careful not to wake her. Evelyn looked up as he appeared in the doorway, his gray hair slightly messed and his cheeks flushed from the November wind. Honey, I'm sorry to wake you. His voice carried that gentle tone she'd fallen in love with 34 years ago. Emergency meeting in Chicago. Flight leaves in 2 hours. Daniel moved through their bedroom like a man running from time itself. Evelyn heard drawers opening and closing, the zip of his leather travel bag, the rustle of shirts being folded too quickly. She remained at the table, watching the Medicare papers blur slightly in the lamplight. He returned wearing his navy suit, the one that made his shoulders look broader and his gray eyes more serious. His cologne hung in the air between them, expensive and clean. Daniel kissed her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. I hate leaving you like this. His hand cupped her chin, thumb brushing her cheek. But this client won't wait. Evelyn nodded. She always nodded. Drive safely. I will. Daniel grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door. Love you, Evie. Love you too. The door closed with a soft click. Evelyn listened to his BMW start in the driveway, the engine purring as it backed out onto Maple Street. The taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving her alone with the Medicare papers and the ticking clock. She tried to focus on the insurance forms, but the numbers swam together. Copays that seemed higher than before. Procedures she didn't remember having. A specialist visit in August that she couldn't recall making. Her signature appeared at the bottom of documents that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Evelyn pushed the papers aside and stood. Her knees protested slightly the arthritis that came with November cold and too many years of running after other people's needs. She moved to Daniel's home office, thinking she might straighten his desk before going to bed. The office smelled like leather and the faint trace of his cologne. His computer was shut down, the screen black and silent. Books about real estate investment lined the shelves, their spines straight and unread looking. Everything in its place, everything organized. That's when she saw it. Daniel's wallet lay wedged beneath a stack of client files, the brown leather worn smooth from 30 years of carrying it in his back pocket. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She picked it up with trembling fingers, feeling its familiar weight. Her husband had just left for a business trip to Chicago. A flight that required identification, credit cards, cash for incidentals. And his wallet, everything he needed to travel, sat forgotten on his desk like a heart left behind in a body. Evelyn opened the wallet with hands that suddenly felt cold. His driver's license stared back at her from behind clear plastic, his photo serious and dependable. 3 credit cards tucked neatly in their slots. $140 in cash, folded crisp and even. She closed the wallet and held it against her chest. Her heart hammered beneath her rib cage, each beat asking the same question: how does a man board a plane without his wallet? The grandfather clock chimed once for the half hour. 12:30 in the morning, and Daniel's flight was supposed to leave at 2:15. Evelyn reached for her cell phone with fingers that shook slightly. She dialed Daniel's number. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His recorded voice, warm and professional: "You've reached Daniel Parker. Please leave a message." Evelyn hung up and tried again. This time it rang twice before the automated system took over. She stared at her phone's screen, watching the call end in silence. Her thumbs moved across the phone's keyboard, typing a text message: "You forgot your wallet." "I'm bringing it." She hit send and watched the message disappear into the digital void. One gray checkmark appeared beside her words, indicating the text had been delivered. But the second checkmark, the one that meant Daniel had read it, never came. Evelyn set the phone down on Daniel's desk and looked around his office. Everything appeared normal. Files in neat stacks. Pens arranged in their holder. The calendar on his desk showed appointments for the coming week, all written in his careful handwriting. But something felt wrong. Not wrong like a broken appliance or a bill that came too early. Wrong like a note played off key in a familiar song. Wrong like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. Evelyn picked up her phone again and opened the rideshare app Daniel had installed for her last month. He said it was safer than calling a taxi, especially for an older woman traveling alone at night. The app glowed to life, showing her location on a small map surrounded by tiny car symbols. She entered Chicago O'Hare Airport as her destination. The fare estimate appeared $43. The wait time 5 minutes. A driver named Kim would arrive in a black sedan. Evelyn's finger hovered over the "Request Ride" button. She couldn't drive to the airport herself. Night driving had become too difficult since her cataract surgery. The glare from oncoming headlights turned the road into a blur of dangerous light. Their usual driver, Marcus, was off duty until morning. But the wallet sat in her palm like a stone. Heavy with all the things Daniel would need. Important enough that a wife would drive through the night to deliver it to her husband's hands. She pressed "Request Ride." The app showed her driver's progress, a small car symbol moving through the streets of Naperville, getting closer with each refresh. 5 minutes became 4, then 3. Evelyn put on her warmest coat and tucked Daniel's wallet into her purse alongside her own. The Mercedes sedan pulled into their driveway exactly on time, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Evelyn locked the front door behind her and walked carefully down the brick steps, gripping the railing with her left hand. The driver was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a clean button-down shirt and spoke with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. "Mrs. Parker? I'm Kim. O'Hare Departures? Yes, please." Evelyn settled into the back seat, the leather cool against her legs. "Terminal 2, if you don't mind." Kim nodded and adjusted his rearview mirror. The car pulled away from her house, leaving the porch light burning like a small lighthouse in the darkness. Evelyn watched the familiar streets of her neighborhood roll past the window houses where neighbors slept peacefully, windows dark and trusting. The radio stayed silent. Kim didn't ask about her late-night airport run or make small talk about the weather. His eyes moved frequently to the rearview mirror, checking the road behind them with an attention that seemed more careful than normal. Evelyn found herself gripping her purse tighter as they approached the highway. Daniel's wallet pressed against her hip through the leather. A reminder of the question she couldn't answer: how does a careful man forget something so essential? The car accelerated onto Interstate 88, heading east toward Chicago and the airport, where her husband was supposed to catch a flight with identification he'd left sitting on his desk. The speedometer needle settled at exactly 65 miles per hour. Kim's hands remained steady on the steering wheel, but his eyes continued their restless checking of the mirror. As the suburbs gave way to farmland and then industrial buildings, Evelyn felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the sensation of being truly awake. Not just conscious, but alert in a way that made her skin feel sensitive and her hearing sharp. The wallet in her purse seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. And in the front seat, Kim drove through the darkness like a man who knew exactly where he was going, even if she didn't. The black sedan exited the highway and approached Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Evelyn could see the terminal buildings rising against the night sky, their windows glowing like a city that never slept. Her fingers traced the outline of Daniel's wallet through her purse, and she rehearsed what she would say when she found him at the gate. Kim steered past the bright curbside drop-off area where travelers hurried with rolling suitcases and taxi drivers called out destinations. Instead, he guided the car toward a darker section near the parking structure, a stretch of concrete where the overhead lights seemed dimmer and the foot traffic thinned to nothing. "This isn't the departures area," Evelyn said, leaning forward in her seat. Her voice carried a tremor she hadn't intended. Kim's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles showed white against his dark skin. He didn't respond immediately, but his eyes moved to the rearview mirror again, not to check traffic this time, but to look directly at her. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm." The car rolled to a stop beside a concrete pillar that cast shadows across the empty sidewalk. Kim shifted into park but left the engine running. The headlights illuminated a stretch of pavement that looked abandoned, forgotten by the busy airport just hundreds of yards away. Evelyn reached for the door handle. "I can walk from here." "Thank you." The handle didn't move. She pulled harder, then tried the other door. Both remained locked, the mechanisms holding firm despite her increasingly frantic attempts to open them. "Let me out." Her voice rose, carrying 34 years of politeness that was rapidly giving way to something sharper. "Let me out right now." Kim turned in his seat to face her fully. His eyes weren't kind anymore, they were alert, almost military in their intensity. "Mrs. Parker, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not get out of this car." Panic hit Evelyn like cold water. She pounded on the window with her fist, the sound dull and useless against the thick glass. Outside, the concrete pillar stood like a silent sentinel, and beyond it, the airport hummed with life that felt impossibly far away. "Help!" she shouted toward the empty sidewalk. "Somebody help me!" Her voice echoed off the concrete and died in the darkness. No security guards appeared. No travelers looked in their direction. The car sat in a pocket of isolation that seemed designed to swallow sound and witnesses equally. Evelyn's breathing came quick and shallow. She fumbled for her phone, thinking of 911, thinking of Daniel, thinking of anyone who might care that a 62-year-old woman was trapped in a stranger's car at 1 o'clock in the morning. "Mrs. Parker." Kim's voice cut through her panic. "Please, look at me." She lifted her eyes to meet his in the rearview mirror. What she saw there wasn't the face of a predator or a criminal. It was the face of a man carrying fear, not for himself, but for her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "But if you get out of this car right now, someone else will." "What are you talking about?" Evelyn's voice cracked on the last word. Kim's throat moved as he swallowed hard. "Your husband. He's not on a business trip." The wallet in Evelyn's purse seemed to grow heavier. "That's impossible. He left for the airport. He has a client meeting." "Mrs. Parker, your husband is here. At this airport. But not where you think." Kim pointed through the windshield toward the terminal buildings. "International departures. Gate G14. With a woman in a red coat." Evelyn's world tilted sideways. The air in the car became thick and hard to breathe. "You're lying." "I wish I was." She stared at Kim's reflection, searching for deception and finding only a sadness that seemed to reach into her chest and squeeze. "How do you know this?" Kim's hands relaxed slightly on the steering wheel. "Because I've been watching him. For weeks." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Because someone hired a man to hurt you tonight. And your husband." Kim's voice trailed off, then strengthened with resolve. Your husband knew you were coming. The clock on the dashboard read 123 a.m. Evelyn watched the numbers change to 124, then 125. Each minute felt like a small death, a piece of her life that she could never reclaim or understand. I don't believe you. But even as she said it, pieces began clicking together in her mind. The Medicare papers she didn't remember signing. The prescription copays that kept rising. Daniel's gentle insistence that she was becoming forgetful. Kim reached into his jacket pocket slowly, keeping his movements visible. He pulled out a small digital camera and handed it to her over the seat back. Press play. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she found the button. The small screen lit up with video footage, grainy but clear enough. Daniel stood near a departure gate, his navy suit unmistakable. Beside him was a woman with auburn hair and a bright red coat. They stood close together, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture that spoke of intimacy and ownership. The woman reached up and straightened Daniel's tie. He smiled, not the careful, measured smile he gave Evelyn at home, but something younger and hungrier. The kind of smile that belonged to a man who thought he was about to start a new life. Evelyn watched her husband of 34 years check his watch, then lean down to whisper something in the woman's ear. The woman laughed and pressed her face against his shoulder. This was taken an hour ago, Kim said quietly. Evelyn's hands shook so violently that the camera slipped from her fingers and landed on the seat beside her. The video continued playing, the sound of distant airport announcements mixing with her husband's recorded laughter. He left his wallet on purpose, she said, the words forming before her conscious mind could stop them. He wanted me to find it. Yes, but why would he want me to come here? If he's leaving with her? Kim's eyes found hers in the mirror again. Because dead women can't file for divorce. And they can't contest wills. The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. She doubled over in the back seat, her forehead pressing against her knees as her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. The Medicare papers, the prescription changes, the life insurance policy Daniel had suggested last month just to be safe, he'd said, at their age. The man they hired, she managed to say. Where is he? Kim checked his watch. Standing behind that concrete pillar. Waiting for you to get out. Evelyn lifted her head and peered through the windshield. The pillar looked solid and innocent, just a piece of airport infrastructure. But now that she knew to look, she could make out the edge of something dark pressed against its far side. A shape that could be a person standing very still. How long has he been there? Since we arrived. He followed us from your house. The revelation struck her like ice water. Someone had been watching her home, tracking her movement, planning her death with the same attention Daniel used to organize his client files. I'm going to be sick, Evelyn whispered. Kim opened the glove compartment and handed her a bottle of water. Drink this. Small sips. The water was cool and clean, washing away the metallic taste of fear that had filled her mouth. As she drank, Evelyn's mind began to clear. The panic receded just enough for anger to take its place. How do you know all this? She asked. Kim was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried decades of weight. Your father saved my life in Korea. Before you were born, I promised him I'd look after his daughter if anything ever happened to him. My father? Evelyn's voice broke. My father died 3 years ago. I know. I was at his funeral. Back row, left side. I've been watching ever since. Evelyn remembered the funeral, a blur of flowers and tears and people offering condolences she couldn't really hear. She'd been so focused on her grief that she hadn't paid attention to the faces in the crowd. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father made me promise to stay invisible unless you were in real danger. Kim's eyes hardened. Tonight, you're in real danger. The dashboard clock showed 131 a.m. Daniel's flight was supposed to leave at 2:15. If Kim was telling the truth, her husband was somewhere in that terminal building. Counting down minutes until he became a widower and a wealthy man. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Kim put the car in drive but kept his foot on the brake. Now we wait for backup. Backup? Chicago PD. They should be here any minute. As if summoned by his words, the first police car appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness as it approached their location. Then a second car, then a third. They moved without sirens, closing in on the concrete pillar with practiced coordination. Evelyn watched through the windshield as officers emerged from their vehicles, hands resting on their weapons. They moved like shadows, surrounding the pillar from multiple angles. "Get down," Kim said. "And stay down until I tell you it's safe." Evelyn pressed her face to her knees again, listening to her heartbeat thunder in her ears. Outside the car, she heard running footsteps, shouted commands, the sound of someone hitting concrete hard. When Kim finally told her to look up, 3 officers were leading a man in a black hoodie toward one of the police cars. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and something had spilled from his pocket onto the pavement, items that caught the light like metal and plastic. One of the officers approached their car and tapped on Kim's window. Kim rolled it down partway. "We got him," the officer said. "Zip ties, chloroform, the whole kit." Evelyn felt her stomach lurch. "Chloroform?" Kim nodded grimly. "You would have been unconscious in seconds. Easier to move a body that way." The officer looked past Kim to Evelyn in the back seat. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Evelyn's voice failed her. She tried again. "I think so. We're going to need a statement. But that can wait until you're somewhere safe." Kim turned to face her fully. "Mrs. Parker, we need to get you home. And we need to make sure your husband thinks you never left the house." "What do you mean? If Daniel believes his plan failed because you couldn't find a ride to the airport, he might try again. Different method, different timing. We need him to think you're still the confused, trusting wife he married." The idea of pretending normalcy, of looking Daniel in the eyes and smiling while knowing what she now knew, made Evelyn feel dizzy. But the alternative was worse. "How long?" she asked. "Until we have enough evidence to put him away forever." Kim put the car in drive and pulled away from the concrete pillar, leaving the police to finish processing the scene. As they headed back toward the highway, Evelyn took one last look through the rear window. The man in the black hoodie was already in the back of a police car, his head down and his shoulders slumped in defeat. But Daniel was still inside the terminal building, still standing beside the woman in the red coat, still believing his wife would never discover the truth. The drive back to Naperville passed in silence. Evelyn held Daniel's wallet in her lap, feeling its weight differently now. It wasn't a forgotten necessity, it was bait in a trap that had nearly cost her everything. When they reached her house, Kim parked in the same spot where he'd picked her up less than 2 hours earlier. The porch light still burned, exactly as she'd left it. "What do I tell him when he comes home?" Evelyn asked. Kim handed her a business card with only a phone number printed on it. "You tell him you couldn't find a ride. You went to bed. You slept through the night. And if he asks about the wallet? You found it in the morning, wedged between the couch cushions where it must have fallen from his pocket." Evelyn nodded, though the thought of lying to Daniel, of protecting him from consequences he deserved, made her feel sick all over again. "Mrs. Parker," Kim said as she reached for the door handle. "From now on, assume everything is being watched and recorded. Every phone call, every conversation, every decision you make. Your life depends on playing this perfectly." The door handle moved freely this time, opening to let in the November air. Evelyn stepped out onto her own driveway, her legs shaky but functional. "Will I see you again?" Kim's smile was sad and certain. "I'll be around. You just won't know it." Evelyn walked back to her front door, fishing her house key from her purse with fingers that only trembled slightly. Behind her, she heard Kim's car pull away, its taillights disappearing into the same darkness that had swallowed Daniel's earlier that evening. Inside her house, the grandfather clock chimed twice for 2 in the morning. The Medicare papers still lay scattered across the dining table, but they looked different now, not confusing, but incriminating. Evidence of a pattern she'd been too trusting to see. Evelyn placed Daniel's wallet on the kitchen counter, positioning it carefully between the couch cushions where a man might believably drop it while reaching for his reading glasses or the television remote. Then she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, changed into her nightgown, and lay down in the bed she'd shared with a man who wanted her dead. But she didn't sleep. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and planned what came next. Daniel returned home at 6:30 the next morning, his key turning in the lock with the same gentle precision he used for everything. Evelyn heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, measured and careful not to wake her. She lay still in their bed, breathing slowly and evenly, practicing the rhythm of sleep. His weight settled on his side of the mattress, the springs creaking softly under him. The familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something else now, coffee and airport air, and the lingering trace of another woman's perfume. "Evie?" His voice was soft, almost tender. "You awake?" She stirred and made a small sound, the kind of noise a woman makes when emerging from deep sleep. Her eyes fluttered open, and she turned toward him with what she hoped looked like drowsy affection. "Daniel? You're home early." His smile was warm and guilty, the expression of a man carrying secrets he believed were safe. "Flight got cancelled. Mechanical issues." Evelyn sat up slowly, her gray hair mussed against the pillow. "Oh no. What about your meeting?" "Postponed until next week." Daniel reached over and smoothed her hair back from her forehead, his fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm sorry I woke you." "It's okay. I was having trouble sleeping anyway." This was true. Evelyn had spent the night staring at shadows on the ceiling, replaying Kim's words and the video footage of her husband with another woman. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen the man in the black hoodie standing behind the concrete pillar. Bad dreams? Daniel's concern sounded genuine. Strange ones. "I dreamed you forgot your wallet and I had to drive to the airport to find you." Daniel's hand stilled against her hair for just a moment, so brief that she might have imagined it. Dreams can feel so real sometimes. Evelyn stretched and yawned, playing the part of a woman whose biggest worry was getting enough sleep. "I'm going to make coffee. Want some?" "That would be wonderful." In the kitchen, Evelyn moved through the familiar routine of morning coffee while Daniel showered. Her hands remained steady as she measured grounds and filled the water reservoir. But her mind raced with questions she couldn't ask and suspicions she couldn't voice. The Medicare papers still lay on the dining table where she'd left them. Evelyn gathered them into a neat stack and tucked them into the drawer where Daniel kept their important documents. She would look at them again later, when she had privacy and time to understand what she was really seeing. Daniel emerged from the bathroom wearing his gray robe and slippers, his hair still damp from the shower. He kissed her cheek as he passed, heading for his office to check emails and return phone calls from his abbreviated trip. "Honey," he called from the doorway. "Have you seen my wallet?" Evelyn's heart jumped, but her voice remained calm. "Your wallet? I can't find it anywhere. I thought I left it on my desk, but..." She heard him moving papers around, opening drawers, checking the same spots twice. His search grew more frantic with each passing minute. "Let me help you look," Evelyn offered, joining him in the office. Together they searched his desk, his dresser, the pockets of every jacket hanging in his closet. Daniel's anxiety was building, his movements becoming sharper and more desperate. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I never lose things." "Did you check the living room?" Evelyn suggested. "Sometimes things fall out when you're sitting on the couch." They moved to the living room, and Evelyn watched as Daniel lifted the cushions on his favorite armchair. Her own wallet appeared, wedged deep between the cushions exactly where Kim had told her to place it. "Found it." Daniel's relief was immediate and profound. He held up the worn leather wallet like a prize. "Must have slipped out of my pocket yesterday evening." "Thank goodness," Evelyn said, and meant it in ways he couldn't understand. Daniel opened the wallet and quickly checked its contents: driver's license, credit cards, cash. Everything appeared to be in order. His shoulders relaxed, and the worry lines around his eyes softened. "I don't know what I would have done if I'd lost this," he said. "Everything important is in here." Evelyn nodded and smiled, thinking of the papers Kim had shown her hidden between the bills. Important things, indeed. Evidence of plans that went far beyond a simple extramarital affair. The rest of the morning passed in careful normalcy. Daniel read the newspaper while Evelyn prepared breakfast. They discussed mundane topics: the weather forecast, grocery shopping, plans for the weekend. But underneath the domestic routine, Evelyn found herself studying her husband with new eyes. She noticed how he checked his phone constantly, glancing at text messages he didn't share. She saw how his jaw tightened when she mentioned visiting her sister next weekend. Most telling of all, she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze calculating and cold. After breakfast, Daniel announced he had errands to run. "Client meeting got pushed back, but I still need to pick up some documents from the office." "Of course," Evelyn said, clearing dishes from the table. "Take your time." He kissed her goodbye, the same gentle peck on the forehead he'd given her for 34 years. But now she felt the performance in it, the careful maintenance of a routine that served his purposes. After Daniel left, Evelyn waited exactly 10 minutes before retrieving Kim's business card from her purse. She dialed the number with fingers that only trembled slightly. Kim, it's Evelyn. He's gone. Good. How did he react to finding the wallet? Relieved. Almost too relieved. Evelyn moved to the window and peered through the curtains at the empty driveway. He said his flight was cancelled due to mechanical issues. Kim was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Parker, I need to tell you something about that flight. What? It was never delayed. It left exactly on schedule at 2:15 this morning. Evelyn sank into Daniel's desk chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. Then where was he? Hotel room downtown. With the woman in the red coat. We have surveillance footage. The room seemed to tilt around her. Evelyn gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. So he was never planning to leave last night. No, the plane ticket was just part of his alibi. If anyone asked, he was supposed to be on a business trip when something happened to you. Something. The man we arrested last night had very specific instructions. Make it look like a mugging gone wrong. No witnesses, no evidence pointing back to your husband. Evelyn's stomach churned. She pressed her free hand to her mouth, fighting down nausea. How much is my life worth to him? Your estate? Including the property you inherited from your father? About $2.4 million. The number hit her like a physical blow. She'd never thought of herself as wealthy, just comfortable, secure in a way that allowed her to help with grandchildren's college funds and donate to charities without checking her bank balance first. Mrs. Parker, you still there? I'm here. Her voice sounded hollow, even to herself. We need to move carefully from here. Daniel's going to try again, but now he'll be more cautious. He thinks you're still unaware, which gives us an advantage. What kind of advantage? We're going to let him think his plan is working. Let him make preparations, gather more evidence. The more rope we give him, the better chance we have of putting him away permanently. Evelyn thought about the Medicare papers in the drawer, the prescription changes she'd noticed. But dismissed the life insurance policy Daniel had insisted they needed. How long has he been planning this? Based on what we've uncovered so far, at least 6 months, possibly longer. 6 months. Half a year of breakfast conversations and bedtime kisses while her husband planned her murder. Half a year of gentle concern for her forgetfulness while he systematically undermined her awareness of her own finances and health. I don't think I can do this, Evelyn whispered. I don't think I can pretend everything's normal when I know what he's planning. Kim's voice was firm but kind. Mrs. Parker, you're stronger than you think. You survived last night. You played your part this morning perfectly. You can do this. But what if I make a mistake? What if he realizes I know? Then you call me immediately. Day or night, doesn't matter. I'll be watching your house, and I have people watching Daniel. You're not alone in this. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her reflection stared back from Daniel's computer screen, a 62-year-old woman with silver hair and lines around her eyes, but also with something new: determination. What do I need to do? Act exactly like you have been. Be the wife he expects, trusting, slightly confused, dependent on his guidance. Meanwhile, I'm going to get you set up with a lawyer who specializes in elder fraud. Elder fraud? What Daniel's doing isn't just murder conspiracy, Mrs. Parker. It's systematic financial elder abuse. The forged documents, the medical manipulation, the insurance changes, it's all designed to make you appear incompetent while he gains control of your assets. Evelyn felt anger building in her chest, hot and clean and surprisingly strengthening. He's been stealing from me. Yes. And we're going to prove it. After hanging up with Kim, Evelyn sat alone in Daniel's office, surrounded by the careful organization of a man she no longer recognized. The books on his shelves, the photos on his desk, the certificates on his walls, everything looked the same, but it all felt like stage dressing now. Props in a performance designed to convince her she was married to someone who loved her. She opened Daniel's desk drawer and found the Medicare papers she'd hidden there. This time, she spread them out and studied them carefully, looking for patterns she'd been too trusting to notice before. The first thing that jumped out was the dates. Several procedures listed as taking place on days when she clearly remembered being home with Daniel, watching television or working in the garden. A consultation with a neurologist she'd never met, for symptoms she'd never reported. The second thing was her signature. It appeared at the bottom of forms authorizing these phantom appointments, but something about the handwriting looked slightly off. The E in Evelyn was too angular. The P in Parker didn't have the small flourish she'd been making since she was 12 years old. Daniel had been forging her signature. Evelyn pulled out her reading glasses and examined the signatures more closely. They were good forgeries, good enough to fool a casual observer or a busy medical office. But they weren't perfect. Daniel had practiced her handwriting, but he'd missed the small details that made it uniquely hers. Her hands shook as she gathered the papers back into a stack. This wasn't just about money or even murder. This was about erasing her identity, making her disappear piece by piece until nothing was left but confusion and dependency. The front door opened, signaling Daniel's return. Evelyn quickly hid the Medicare papers and moved to the kitchen, where she began preparing lunch with hands that moved automatically through familiar motions. "How was your morning?" she asked when Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Productive. Got caught up on some paperwork." He moved behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What's for lunch?" "Chicken salad. Your favorite." "Perfect." Daniel's breath was warm against her ear. "You take such good care of me." Evelyn leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her spine. 6 months ago, this embrace would have felt like love. Now it felt like calculation, a predator holding his prey close enough to feel its pulse. "Daniel? Yes? Do you love me?" His arms tightened around her slightly. "Of course I do. What kind of question is that?" Sometimes I worry that I'm becoming a burden. With my memory problems and all the doctor visits lately." Daniel turned her around to face him, his hands cupping her face with what appeared to be genuine tenderness. "Evie, listen to me. You are not a burden. You're my wife, and I'm going to take care of you no matter what." Looking into his eyes, Evelyn almost believed him. The performance was that good, that convincing. If she hadn't seen the video footage, if Kim hadn't shown her the truth, she would have melted into this moment of reassurance. Instead, she smiled and nodded, playing her own part in a play that had become a matter of life and death. "I love you too," she said, and watched Daniel's face for any sign that he could hear the difference in her voice. But his smile remained warm and sure, the expression of a man who believed his secret was safe. After lunch, Daniel retreated to his office for phone calls and email. Evelyn cleaned the kitchen and then sat at the dining table with a book, but the words blurred together as her mind raced with everything she'd learned. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number: "Legal consultation scheduled for tomorrow 2 p.m. Address attached. Tell Daniel you're having lunch with your sister. K." Evelyn deleted the message immediately and returned to her book, but her heart hammered with anticipation and fear. Tomorrow she would begin building a case against the man who had shared her bed for 34 years. Tomorrow she would start fighting for her life in ways she'd never imagined necessary. But for now, she would continue playing the role of the trusting wife, counting down the hours until she could begin fighting back. The law office of Rebecca Stern sat nestled between a coffee shop and a bookstore on a quiet street in downtown Wheaton. Evelyn parked her Honda Civic in the small lot behind the building, checking her rearview mirror twice to make sure she hadn't been followed. The simple act of driving alone, something she'd done thousands of times before, now felt dangerous and subversive. She told Daniel she was having lunch with her sister Margaret, a lie that came surprisingly easily. Margaret lived in Milwaukee and rarely called, making her a perfect alibi for activities Daniel couldn't verify. The deception sat heavy in Evelyn's stomach, but not as heavy as the alternative. The waiting room was comfortable and discreet, decorated in soft blues and grays with abstract paintings that suggested peace without demanding attention. Evelyn checked in with the receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes who seemed to understand that some clients needed extra gentleness. "Mrs. Parker? Rebecca will see you now." Rebecca Stern was younger than Evelyn had expected, perhaps 45. With silver-streaked brown hair and glasses that made her dark eyes look larger and more sympathetic. She stood to shake Evelyn's hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable." Can I get you coffee? Tea? Coffee would be nice. Evelyn chose the chair across from Rebecca's desk rather than the couch in the corner. This felt like business, not therapy, and she needed the formality to keep her emotions in check. Rebecca poured coffee from a small machine on a side table, adding cream and sugar when Evelyn requested them. The normalcy of the gesture, two women sharing coffee on a Thursday afternoon, made everything else feel surreal. Kim told me you're in immediate danger, Rebecca said, settling into her own chair. Before we begin, I need you to know that everything you tell me is protected by attorney-client privilege. Nothing you say will leave this room unless you authorize it. Evelyn nodded, though her throat felt too tight for words. I also need you to know that what we're dealing with is more common than you might think. Elder financial abuse affects millions of Americans every year, and intimate partner abuse among seniors is significantly underreported. I never thought of myself as. Evelyn's voice trailed off. As what? As someone who would need protection from her own husband. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Evelyn, may I call you Evelyn? Predators often target the people who trust them most. The fact that Daniel had access to your life, your finances, your medical care, makes him more dangerous, not less. Over the next hour, Evelyn told her story, starting with the Medicare papers she couldn't understand and ending with Kim's revelation about Daniel's plan. Rebecca listened without interruption, taking notes on a legal pad in careful handwriting. When Evelyn finished, Rebecca set down her pen and studied her notes. The pattern is textbook elder financial abuse with escalation to attempted homicide. The forged signatures, the medical manipulation, the isolation, these are all classic tactics. Isolation? Has Daniel encouraged you to see fewer friends lately? Maybe suggested that certain people are too demanding or don't understand your health issues? Evelyn thought about her bridge club, which she'd stopped attending after Daniel mentioned how tired she looked after their weekly games. And her book club, which met at the library every other Tuesday. Daniel had suggested she might find the discussions too stimulating given her memory concerns. Yes, she admitted, but I thought he was just being protective. Abusers often disguise control as care. By isolating you from outside perspectives, Daniel ensured that his version of reality was the only one you heard. Rebecca pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer and extracted several documents. Kim provided me with copies of the evidence he's gathered so far. I've also done some preliminary research on your financial accounts. The documents Rebecca spread across the desk made Evelyn's stomach clench. Bank statements showing large withdrawals she didn't remember authorizing. Changes to her investment portfolio that shifted money from conservative funds to riskier options. Most damning of all, a life insurance policy worth $1 million that she'd never agreed to purchase. When did you sign up for this life insurance? Rebecca asked, pointing to the policy. Evelyn studied the signature line. Her name was there in handwriting that looked like hers but wasn't quite right. I didn't. Daniel must have forged this too. The policy was purchased 3 months ago, with Daniel as the sole beneficiary. The premiums are being automatically deducted from your checking account. 3 months. Evelyn tried to remember what had been happening in their lives 3 months ago. It was August. They'd taken a weekend trip to Door County, their annual anniversary getaway. Daniel had been especially romantic that weekend, bringing her flowers and suggesting they renew their vows for their 35th anniversary next year. Now she understood why he'd been so affectionate. He was celebrating the beginning of the end of their marriage. What about the medical fraud? Evelyn asked. Rebecca pulled out another set of papers. Kim's contacts in law enforcement have been investigating the doctored Medicare claims. You've allegedly been receiving treatment for early-stage dementia, despite never being diagnosed with any cognitive impairment. Dementia? It's brilliant, in a sick way. By establishing a paper trail showing cognitive decline, Daniel creates reasonable doubt about your competence. If anyone questions your signatures or decisions, he can point to your medical records as evidence that you're confused and unreliable. Evelyn felt anger building in her chest again, hotter and cleaner than the fear. He's been poisoning my reputation. Exactly. And if his murder plot had succeeded, the investigation would have focused on a mugging gone wrong. Your dementia would have explained any inconsistencies in Daniel's story. A confused wife wandering into a dangerous area, despite her loving husband's efforts to keep her safe. Rebecca gathered the documents back into a neat stack. The good news is that we have solid evidence of multiple felonies. The bad news is that we need more before we can move against him legally. What kind of more? We need to document the ongoing fraud. Catch him in the act of forging signatures or manipulating your medical records. Most importantly, we need evidence of his intent to harm you physically. Evelyn's coffee had grown cold during their conversation. She wrapped her hands around the mug anyway, seeking warmth and comfort from the familiar gesture. Kim mentioned something about letting Daniel think his plan is working. That's right. We're going to set a trap, but it requires you to continue playing the role of the unknowing victim. Can you do that? I think so. Yesterday morning was difficult, but I managed. Rebecca studied Evelyn's face carefully. This is going to get more difficult before it gets easier. Daniel will likely escalate his efforts, especially if he thinks his first attempt failed due to bad luck rather than intervention. What does escalation look like? More pressure to sign documents. Suggestions that you need more medical care or supervision. Possibly attempts to isolate you further from anyone who might notice changes in your behavior or competence. Evelyn thought about Daniel's gentle suggestions that she seemed tired lately, that maybe she should see a specialist about her memory issues. Now those conversations took on a sinister cast. There's something else, Rebecca continued. We've identified the woman Daniel was with at the airport. Evelyn's hands tightened on her coffee mug. Who is she? Her name is Linda Vasquez. She works for a private investment firm in Chicago. Our investigation suggests she's been helping Daniel move your assets into accounts you don't have access to. She's not just his mistress. She's his partner in stealing from me. It appears that way. Linda has experience in financial manipulation. She was investigated by the SEC 2 years ago for questionable practices with elderly clients, though no charges were filed. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. It was bad enough that Daniel wanted to murder her for money. Learning that he'd recruited a professional to help steal from her first made it feel calculated in a way that cut deeper than simple greed. What happens next? Evelyn asked. Rebecca handed her a business card for a different law firm. Tomorrow, you're going to call this number and schedule an appointment to update your will. Tell Daniel you want to make sure everything is in order, given your recent memory concerns. But I don't have memory concerns. Daniel thinks you do. And he thinks he's managing your finances because you're no longer competent to do so. When you suddenly express interest in your estate planning, it will panic him. Won't that make me more of a target? In the short term, yes. But it will also force him to move more quickly and less carefully. Desperate people make mistakes, and we need Daniel to make a mistake we can prosecute. Rebecca walked Evelyn to the door, her hand resting briefly on Evelyn's shoulder. You're incredibly brave to do this. Many women in your situation never fight back. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Evelyn. It's acting in spite of fear. Driving home, Evelyn practiced the conversation she would have with Daniel about updating her will. She rehearsed her tone, her facial expressions, the exact words she would use to sound concerned but not suspicious. The performance felt unnatural and exhausting, but it was the price of staying alive long enough to see justice served. Daniel was in the kitchen when she arrived home, preparing dinner with the careful attention he brought to everything. The sight of him chopping vegetables, something he'd done thousands of times during their marriage, now looked different. His hands were steady and precise, but now she knew what else those hands were capable of planning. How was lunch with Margaret? He asked without looking up from the cutting board. Good. She's doing well. The lie came easier than expected. We talked about Mom's jewelry and some of the family photos we still need to sort through. Daniel nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. It's good that you're staying connected with family. Actually, Margaret said something that got me thinking. Evelyn kept her voice casual, conversational. She mentioned that she recently updated her will, and it made me realize I haven't looked at ours in years. Daniel's knife paused for just a moment before resuming its steady rhythm. Our estate planning is fine, honey. I make sure everything stays current. I know you do, but I was thinking maybe I should understand it better myself. Maybe we could meet with a lawyer together, just so I know what would happen if. She let her voice trail off, as if the thought of mortality was too difficult to finish. If what? If something happened to one of us? I just want to make sure I understand the arrangements. Daniel set down his knife and turned to face her fully. His expression was patient, slightly condescending the look he gave her when he thought she was being unnecessarily worried about something he'd already handled. Evie, you don't need to worry about any of that. I've taken care of everything. All you need to focus on is staying healthy and happy. But I want to understand. It's my future too. Something flickered behind Daniel's eyes, irritation, maybe, or calculation. But his smile remained warm and reassuring. Of course it is. Tell you what, let me pull together all the relevant documents, and we can go over them this weekend. Would that make you feel better? That would be perfect. Daniel moved to embrace her, his arms encircling her waist in what should have felt like comfort. Instead, Evelyn found herself noticing how strong his grip was, how easily he could overpower her if he chose to. I love how much you trust me, he murmured against her hair. It makes me want to protect you even more. Standing in her husband's arms, Evelyn felt the full weight of her situation. She was utterly alone with a man who was planning to kill her, pretending to love him while gathering evidence to destroy him. The isolation was complete and terrifying. But it was also temporary. Rebecca and Kim were building a case. The truth was coming together piece by piece, document by document. Daniel's careful planning would become the foundation of his own prosecution. I trust you completely, Evelyn said, and felt Daniel's arms tighten around her in what might have been affection or satisfaction, or both. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, Evelyn lay awake staring at the ceiling and planning her survival. Tomorrow she would call the estate lawyer Rebecca had recommended. This weekend she would sit through Daniel's explanation of their financial arrangements, knowing it was all lies designed to confuse and manipulate her. But she wouldn't be confused anymore. And she wouldn't be a victim. She would be gathering evidence, one careful conversation at a time, until she had enough to put Daniel away forever. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, with November wind rattling the windows and bare tree branches scraping against the roof. Evelyn woke early, as she had every morning since learning the truth about Daniel, her body refusing to relax into sleep while danger shared her bed. Daniel was already awake, sitting on his side of the mattress with his back to her. He was reading something on his phone, his shoulders tense in a way that suggested the messages weren't routine business correspondence. Everything all right? Evelyn asked, her voice carefully modulated to sound like a wife checking on her husband, rather than a woman monitoring her potential killer. Daniel's fingers moved quickly across the screen, deleting whatever he'd been reading. Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about. He stood and moved toward the bathroom, but not before Evelyn caught a glimpse of his expression in the mirror. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed with concentration. Whatever message he'd received had upset him. While Daniel showered, Evelyn made coffee and tried to imagine what could have put that look on his face. Had Kim's investigation been discovered? Was Daniel getting suspicious about her airport trip? Or was this simply the normal stress of a man juggling multiple deceptions? Ready for our estate planning review? Daniel asked when he joined her in the kitchen, his demeanor back to its usual controlled warmth. I've been looking forward to it. This was true, though not for the reasons Daniel assumed. Daniel had transformed their dining table into a makeshift conference room, with manila folders arranged in neat rows and legal documents sorted by date and importance. His laptop was open to a spreadsheet that appeared to track their various assets and investments. I thought we'd start with the basics and work our way up to the more complex arrangements, Daniel said, settling into the chair beside hers. Close enough to point out important details, close enough to watch her reactions. The first document was their joint will, last updated 4 years ago. Evelyn read through the familiar language about asset distribution and guardianship arrangements, but something was different. The version Daniel showed her listed him as the primary beneficiary of her inherited property, the house her father had left her, the small rental property in Wisconsin, the investment accounts that predated their marriage. I don't remember agreeing to this, Evelyn said, pointing to the relevant section. Daniel's hand covered hers gently. We discussed it when your father passed away. You were so upset during that time, I think you just forgot. The lawyer recommended consolidating everything for simplicity. Evelyn stared at the signature page. Her name was there in handwriting that looked convincingly like hers, but she had no memory of signing such a document. More importantly, she would never have agreed to such terms without her sister Margaret being included. "Where's the copy I signed?" "Right there in front of you." "No, I mean my personal copy. The one I would have kept for my records." Daniel was quiet for a moment too long. "I think it's in the safe deposit box with the other important documents." Another lie. Evelyn made mental note to ask Rebecca about accessing her safe deposit box independently. If Daniel was forging estate documents, there might be other evidence hidden there. "What about life insurance?" she asked. Daniel's expression brightened, as if this topic pleased him more than the will discussion. He produced a thick folder containing multiple insurance policies, some familiar, some completely new to Evelyn. "I've been working to make sure you're well protected," he said, spreading the documents across the table. "Health insurance, long-term care coverage, and substantial life insurance in case something unexpected happens." The life insurance policy Rebecca had shown her was there, along with two others Evelyn had never seen before. The coverage amounts were staggering, far more than they needed to maintain their current lifestyle. More importantly, Daniel was listed as the sole beneficiary on all three policies. "This seems like a lot of coverage," Evelyn said. "At our age, you can never be too careful. Medical expenses can be devastating, and I want to make sure the survivor can maintain their quality of life." The irony was breathtaking. Daniel was using her fear of becoming a financial burden to justify policies that would make her murder profitable. "What if I wanted to change the beneficiaries? Add Margaret or some of the grandchildren?" Daniel's pen stopped moving across the legal pad where he'd been making notes. "We could certainly discuss that. But remember, the point is to protect the surviving spouse. If something happened to me, you'd need every penny to maintain the house and cover medical expenses." "And if something happened to me? Then I'd use the money to honor your memory. Maybe establish a scholarship fund or make donations to your favorite charities." Evelyn forced herself to smile and nod, as if this explanation satisfied her concerns. But inside, she was calculating $3 million in life insurance coverage, plus her inherited assets, plus their joint savings and investments. Her death would make Daniel a very wealthy man. They continued reviewing documents for another hour. Daniel showed her investment accounts she didn't remember opening, Medicare supplemental policies she'd never requested, and legal agreements that transferred increasing amounts of decision-making authority to him. Each document bore her signature, but none of them reflected decisions she remembered making. The forgeries were sophisticated. Daniel had clearly been practicing her handwriting for months, maybe years. "I have to say, I'm impressed by how organized you've kept everything," Evelyn said when they finished. "But I feel a little overwhelmed by how complicated it's all become." "That's why you have me," Daniel replied, gathering the documents back into their folders. "You don't need to worry about the details. I'll take care of everything." The phrase, "I'll take care of everything," echoed in Evelyn's mind long after Daniel returned the documents to his office. She'd heard those words thousands of times during their marriage, usually as reassurance when she felt anxious about money or planning. Now they sounded like a threat. That afternoon, while Daniel worked in his office, Evelyn called the estate attorney Rebecca had recommended. The conversation was brief and coded. She requested a consultation about updating her will, mentioning that she wanted to review her options independently of her husband's input. The appointment was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Another lunch with Margaret, another small deception in service of a larger truth. After hanging up, Evelyn sat in her kitchen and tried to process everything she'd learned from the morning's document review. The scope of Daniel's deception was breathtaking. Not just the murder plot Kim had uncovered, but months or years of systematic financial manipulation. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Trusting, dependent, grateful for a husband who handled all the complicated aspects of their financial life. That woman would have looked at Daniel's careful organization and felt lucky to be so well cared for. Now she understood that Daniel's care was actually a cage he'd been building around her, one document at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kim. "How did the document review go?" Evelyn typed back carefully, "Very educational. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Yes. Same coffee shop as before, 2 p.m. Evelyn deleted the text thread and returned to her kitchen tasks, but her mind remained focused on Tuesday's appointment with the estate attorney. Whatever documents Daniel had shown her that morning were probably the cleaned-up versions, the ones designed to look legitimate to a casual observer. The real evidence would be in the versions he thought she'd never see, the original forgeries, the accounts he'd opened without her knowledge, the policies and agreements that revealed his true intentions. Daniel emerged from his office around 4 o'clock, looking satisfied with whatever work he'd completed. "How about we go out for dinner tonight? That Italian place you like?" "That sounds wonderful." At dinner, Daniel was charming and attentive, asking about her day and sharing amusing stories from his work. To any observer, they would have looked like a long-married couple enjoying each other's company. But Evelyn found herself studying Daniel's performance rather than enjoying it. She noticed how he deflected her questions about his clients, how he steered conversations away from topics that might require specifics. Most telling, she caught him checking his phone several times, his expression growing tense each time he read his messages. "Busy week coming up?" she asked. "A few challenging situations. Nothing I can't handle." On the drive home, Daniel took a route that led past the office building where Rebecca Stern worked. As they passed the familiar brick facade, Evelyn felt a moment of panic. What if Daniel somehow knew about her legal consultation? But he showed no reaction to the building, continuing their conversation about weekend plans and household repairs that needed attention. That night, as they prepared for bed, Daniel seemed more affectionate than usual. He brushed her hair while she sat at her vanity, his fingers gentle as they worked through the silver strands. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he murmured. "About wanting to understand our financial arrangements better. Oh, I'm proud of you for taking an interest. It shows you're staying mentally sharp, despite the little memory issues you've been having." Evelyn met his eyes in the vanity mirror. "Do you really think I have memory problems?" Daniel's hands paused in her hair. "Nothing serious, just the normal aging process. That's why it's so important that you have someone looking out for you. Someone like you. Someone who loves you enough to handle the difficult decisions." Lying in bed beside Daniel that night, Evelyn realized that her husband wasn't just planning to kill her, he was preparing to gaslight anyone who might question his actions afterward. The memory problems he kept mentioning weren't symptoms he'd observed, they were alibis he was creating. If his murder plot succeeded, Daniel would be the grieving widower whose wife had been struggling with cognitive decline. Any inconsistencies in her behavior or decisions could be explained by her condition. Anyone who questioned Daniel's version of events would be told that poor Evelyn had been confused near the end. But Evelyn wasn't confused. For the first time in months, maybe years, she was thinking with perfect clarity. Tuesday afternoon couldn't come soon enough. The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the top floor of a restored Victorian mansion in downtown Geneva. Evelyn arrived 10 minutes early for her appointment, using the extra time to sit in her car and practice the questions she wanted to ask. This meeting felt different from her consultation with Rebecca. That conversation had been about understanding what Daniel had done to her. This meeting was about fighting back. Thomas Harrison was older than Rebecca, perhaps in his 60s. With white hair and the kind of steady presence that suggested decades of handling difficult family situations. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, and his office was decorated with family photos and community service awards that spoke to deep local roots. "Mrs. Parker, I understand you're interested in reviewing your estate planning options." "Yes, but there are some complications." Evelyn had decided to be direct rather than dancing around the truth. "I have reason to believe my husband has been forging my signature on various legal and financial documents." Thomas's expression didn't change, but he set down his pen and folded his hands on his desk. "That's a serious allegation. What makes you think this might be happening?" Over the next hour, Evelyn explained everything: the Medicare fraud, the life insurance policies she'd never authorized, the will that showed asset distributions she'd never agreed to. She showed Thomas photos she'd taken of the suspicious signatures, along with examples of her genuine handwriting for comparison. "You're right to be concerned," Thomas said after reviewing the evidence. "These signatures show clear signs of forgery, similar overall appearance but missing the subtle characteristics that make handwriting unique." "What can I do about it?" "Several things. First, we can create a new will that accurately reflects your wishes. Second, we can establish safeguards to prevent future unauthorized changes to your estate planning. Third, we can document everything to support potential criminal charges against your husband. Thomas pulled a blank legal pad from his desk drawer. Let's start with your actual wishes for asset distribution. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt like she was making decisions about her own life. She specified that her inherited property should go to her sister Margaret and her grandchildren, not to Daniel. She established charitable donations to organizations she actually cared about, not generic causes that would make Daniel look generous to the community. Most importantly, she added a clause that would void all bequests to Daniel if her death was ruled suspicious, or if he was charged with any crime related to her finances or person. This is sometimes called a slayer clause, Thomas explained. It prevents beneficiaries from profiting from the death of the person who named them in their will. Will it hold up in court? If properly documented, yes. It's becoming increasingly common in cases where domestic violence or elder abuse is a concern. Thomas also suggested establishing a living trust that would protect Evelyn's assets from unauthorized access. The trust would be managed by an independent trustee, someone Daniel couldn't manipulate or control. I'd recommend naming your sister as successor trustee, along with our firm as institutional co-trustee. That provides both personal attention and professional oversight. How long will all this take to set up? The paperwork can be completed within a week. The challenge will be implementing these changes without alerting your husband to what you're doing. They discussed logistics, how to transfer assets without Daniel's knowledge, how to change beneficiaries on insurance policies and investment accounts, how to establish the new legal structures while maintaining the appearance of normal marital financial cooperation. There's one more thing, Thomas said as their meeting concluded. Given what you've told me about your husband's behavior, I'm concerned for your immediate safety. Have you considered staying somewhere else while we sort this out legally? I can't leave. If Daniel realizes I know what he's planning, he might disappear or accelerate his timeline. I need to stay close enough to gather more evidence. Thomas nodded grimly. Then please be extremely careful. And consider this: every day you remain in that house, you're at risk. Driving home, Evelyn felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief because she was finally taking control of her own financial future. Terror because she understood more clearly than ever how much danger she was in. Daniel was gardening when she arrived home, raking leaves in the backyard with methodical precision. The sight of him engaged in such normal domestic activity felt surreal, given everything she now knew about his secret life. How was lunch with Margaret? He asked, barely looking up from his work. Good. She's thinking about selling Mom's house and wanted my opinion about the real estate market. Daniel straightened and wiped his hands on his jeans. Speaking of real estate, I've been thinking we should consider downsizing. This house is getting too big for just the two of us. Downsizing? Something smaller. Maybe a condo or townhouse. Less maintenance, more security, closer to medical facilities. Evelyn felt her stomach clench. I love this house. It's been our home for 28 years. I know, honey, but we need to think practically about the future. What if your memory problems get worse? What if you need more care than I can provide at home? The manipulation was so smooth, so apparently caring, that Evelyn almost admired its craftsmanship. Daniel was preparing her to accept a smaller living space, maybe somewhere more isolated, with fewer neighbors who might notice if something happened to her. I'm not ready to think about that yet, she said. Daniel's smile was patient but determined. Of course not. But it's my job to think ahead, to make sure you're protected even if your condition progresses. There was that phrase again, your condition. Daniel had decided she was cognitively impaired, and he was building every conversation around that assumption. No matter what she said or did, her resistance to his suggestions could be dismissed as confusion or stubbornness related to her memory problems. That evening, Daniel suggested they watch a documentary about early-onset dementia. I thought it might help us both understand what we're dealing with, he said, settling beside her on the couch with the remote control. The documentary was heartbreaking and terrifying: families struggling with a disease that stole memories and personality one piece at a time. But Evelyn realized Daniel wasn't watching it to understand her condition. He was studying it to learn how to imitate the symptoms more convincingly. This must be so scary for you, Daniel murmured during a particularly difficult scene about a woman who no longer recognized her children. But I want you to know I'll never put you in an institution. I'll take care of you at home, no matter how bad it gets. That's very generous, Evelyn managed. It's not generous. It's love. After the documentary ended, Daniel helped Evelyn sort her evening medications, a routine they'd established months ago when he'd expressed concern about her forgetting to take her pills. Now she wondered if he'd been altering her prescriptions, adding medications that might cause confusion or memory problems. Daniel, can I see the bottles these came from? Of course. He produced 3 prescription bottles from the kitchen cabinet, all bearing her name and familiar medication names. But something nagged at Evelyn about the dosages. These doses seem higher than what I remember taking. Daniel's expression remained patient and slightly sad. The doctor increased them last month when you mentioned feeling more anxious and forgetful. Don't you remember the appointment? Evelyn didn't remember any such appointment, but she was beginning to understand that her memory wasn't the problem. Daniel was creating fictional medical visits the same way he'd created fictional Medicare claims. Which doctor was that? Dr. Patel, the psychiatrist who specializes in geriatric mental health. Evelyn had never heard of Dr. Patel and had certainly never seen a geriatric psychiatrist. But she nodded and smiled as if the name was familiar. I'll take the regular dose tonight, she said. I haven't been feeling particularly anxious lately. Whatever you think is best, Daniel agreed, but she caught him watching as she counted out half the usual number of pills. That night, Evelyn lay in bed reviewing everything she'd learned from Thomas Harrison about protecting her assets and documenting Daniel's fraud. The legal wheels were now in motion, but she estimated it would take at least another week to complete all the necessary paperwork and account transfers. A week felt like an eternity when every day brought new evidence of Daniel's escalating manipulation. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Kim. Need to meet tomorrow morning. Important developments. Evelyn deleted the message and tried to sleep, but her mind raced with possibilities. What kind of important developments? Had Daniel been caught doing something incriminating? Had the investigation uncovered new evidence? Or had Daniel become suspicious and taken steps to accelerate his plan? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Evelyn's last conscious thought was a question that would haunt her dreams. How much time did she have left before Daniel decided that his careful patience was no longer serving his purposes? The coffee shop was busier than usual for a Wednesday morning, filled with laptop-wielding remote workers and mothers meeting after school drop-off. Evelyn chose a corner table where she could see both entrances, a precaution that had become second nature since learning about the threats to her life. Kim arrived exactly on time, carrying a messenger bag that looked heavier than usual. His expression was grim as he settled into the chair across from her. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Evelyn's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. "What kind of problem?" "Daniel knows you went to the airport that night." The words hit her like cold water. "How?" Kim pulled a tablet from his messenger bag and showed her a series of photographs. The images were grainy but clear enough. Evelyn getting into Kim's sedan, their car stopped beside the concrete pillar, police officers making the arrest. "Security cameras?" Evelyn asked. "Private investigator. Daniel hired someone to follow you, probably starting the day after his first plan failed." Evelyn studied the photographs, her mind racing. "If he knows I was there, then he knows his plan was exposed." "Yes. But here's the interesting part, he hasn't confronted you about it. That suggests he's still planning to play innocent while developing a new approach." Kim swiped to the next image, showing Daniel and Linda Vasquez in what appeared to be a hotel lobby. Their body language was tense, urgent. Linda was pointing at something on her phone while Daniel's hands were clenched into fists. This was taken yesterday morning, about 2 hours after these surveillance photos were delivered to Daniel's office. They're panicking. More than panicking. They're accelerating. Kim showed her additional photos: Daniel meeting with an unknown man in a parking garage, Linda entering and leaving a bank with a briefcase. Daniel purchasing a large quantity of cash from a check cashing store. "We think they're preparing to leave the country. Probably within the next few days." Evelyn felt the walls closing in around her. "But they can't access my money if I'm still alive." "No. Which means they're going to try again to kill you, probably tonight or tomorrow." The coffee shop suddenly felt too bright, too noisy, too full of people who had no idea that a woman at the corner table was discussing her own murder. Evelyn gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. What do we do? Kim leaned forward, lowering his voice. We finish this. Tonight. What do you mean? We're going to catch them in the act. But it requires you to play bait one more time. Evelyn's stomach lurched. The memory of sitting trapped in Kim's car while a killer waited in the shadows was still fresh enough to make her hands shake. I know it's asking a lot, Kim continued. But we need irrefutable evidence of Daniel's intent to harm you. Without that, he might beat the financial fraud charges and walk away free. What would I have to do? Kim pulled a small device from his messenger bag, something that looked like a hearing aid but was clearly electronic surveillance equipment. This is a wireless transmitter. You'd wear it during any conversation with Daniel about your suspicions. If he reveals anything incriminating, we'll have it recorded. And if he doesn't talk? If he just acts? We'll have officers positioned around your house. The moment Daniel makes any aggressive move, they'll intervene. Evelyn thought about Thomas Harrison's warning from the day before. Every day you remain in that house, you're at risk. Now that risk was escalating to a certainty. How do you know Daniel will try something tonight? Kim showed her one final photograph: Daniel loading suitcases into the trunk of his BMW. Because his flight to Costa Rica leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. Non-extradition country, private airfield, new identities already prepared. He's really leaving, with or without your money. But preferably with. They spent another hour planning the operation. Evelyn would return home and behave normally until evening. At dinner, she would casually mention that she'd been having strange dreams about the night. Daniel supposedly missed his flight dreams that were too detailed to be coincidental. If Daniel thinks you remember being at the airport, he'll have to deal with you immediately, Kim explained. He can't leave the country with you as a loose end. Deal with me how? Kim's expression was gentle but honest. Probably poison. Quick, looks like a medical emergency, gives him an alibi about rushing you to the hospital where you unfortunately die from complications. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried to imagine sitting across the dinner table from Daniel while he added something lethal to her food or wine. The thought made her nauseated, but it also made her angry. How many other women has he done this to? As far as we know, you're the first. But Linda Vasquez has a history. 2 previous boyfriends died under suspicious circumstances, one in a car accident, one from an apparent heart attack. Both had recently updated their life insurance policies in her favor. She's done this before, multiple times. We think she recruited Daniel specifically because your assets made you a high-value target. The revelation that her marriage had been calculated from the beginning, that Daniel had targeted her wealth. Rather than falling in love and later deciding to steal it, felt like a different kind of violation. She'd been prey from the moment Linda identified her as a potential victim. Mrs. Parker, Kim said gently. Are you sure you want to do this? We can arrange protective custody instead. Get you somewhere safe while we build the case with the evidence we already have. Evelyn thought about all the other women Daniel and Linda might target if they escaped justice. She thought about the legal advice Thomas Harrison had given her: sometimes you have to choose between safety and closure. I'll do it, she said. Kim provided her with detailed instructions about wearing the wire, how to position herself during conversations to ensure clear audio, code words she could use if she felt in immediate danger. Most importantly, he showed her the panic button disguised as a medical alert pendant. Press this, and we'll be through your door in 30 seconds. Driving home, Evelyn rehearsed the performance she would give that evening. She had to seem suspicious enough to prompt Daniel into revealing his plans, but not so knowledgeable that he realized the extent of her awareness. The house felt different when she walked through the front door, not like home, but like a stage set for the final act of a play that had been running for months without her knowledge. Daniel was waiting in the living room, sitting in his favorite armchair with a glass of wine and an expression of forced calm. The suitcases Kim had photographed were nowhere to be seen, but Evelyn noticed that several family photos had been removed from the mantelpiece. How was your morning? Daniel asked, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he'd used throughout their marriage. Quiet. I had coffee with a friend and did some shopping. Evelyn sat across from him, close enough for the wire to pick up his responses but far enough away to reach the panic button if necessary. Anyone I know? Just Sarah from the book club. We were talking about memory, how sometimes dreams feel so real they seem like actual experiences. Daniel's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. Dreams can be very vivid. I've been having the strangest recurring dream lately. About that night you missed your flight to Chicago. Oh? Evelyn leaned forward, as if sharing a confidence. In the dream, I drive to the airport to bring you your wallet. But when I get there, you're not at the gate you're supposed to be at. You're somewhere else entirely. Daniel set down his wine glass with careful control. Dreams often mix up details. Your subconscious probably just jumbled the timeline. Maybe, but it felt so real. In the dream, there are police cars and someone gets arrested. And you're standing with a woman in a red coat. The change in Daniel's expression was subtle but unmistakable. The practiced warmth disappeared, replaced by something calculating and cold. That's quite an elaborate dream. It is, isn't it? I keep wondering what it means. Daniel stood and moved to the window, ostensibly checking the weather but actually giving himself time to think. When he turned back toward her, his smile was back in place, but it no longer reached his eyes. I think you might be more stressed than you realize, Evie. These vivid dreams, the memory confusion, the anxiety about our finances, it all suggests you might benefit from professional help. What kind of professional help? A psychiatrist. Someone who specializes in age-related cognitive changes. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Daniel was shifting into his endgame if he couldn't kill her quietly. He would have her declared incompetent and committed to an institution where he could control her medication and access to the outside world. I don't think that's necessary. Daniel moved to sit on the arm of her chair, his hand resting on her shoulder with deceptive gentleness. Honey, I've been worried about you for months. The forgetfulness, the confusion, these strange dreams that seem real to you, these are symptoms we can't ignore. Symptoms of what? Early stage dementia. I've been researching it, and everything fits. The good news is that with proper medication and care, we can slow the progression significantly. Evelyn looked up at her husband of 34 years, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The man who had shared her bed, her hopes, her trust, was calmly explaining why she needed to be drugged into compliance with his theft and murder plans. And if I refuse treatment? Daniel's hand tightened on her shoulder. Then I'd have to petition the court for guardianship. For your own protection, of course. Of course. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 34 years of marriage pressing down between them like a stone. Finally, Daniel stood and moved toward the kitchen. Why don't I make us some dinner? Something special, since we need to have some difficult conversations about your care. Evelyn watched him go, her hand moving instinctively toward the panic button hidden beneath her blouse. She understood now that Daniel had moved beyond planning her murder, he was implementing it. The question was whether Kim's surveillance team would intervene in time to save her life. Or whether she would become Linda Vasquez's third victim in a partnership built on love of money and contempt for human life. In the kitchen, she heard Daniel opening cabinets and running water. Preparing their last meal together, though only one of them knew it. The kitchen smelled of garlic and wine, familiar scents that had once meant comfort and home. Now they felt like a funeral arrangement, beautiful but marking an ending. Evelyn sat at the dining table Daniel had set with their good china, the wedding pattern they'd chosen 35 years ago when they believed in forever. Chicken marsala, Daniel announced, carrying 2 plates from the kitchen. Your favorite. The irony wasn't lost on her. Even planning her murder, Daniel couldn't resist the small gestures that had defined their marriage, remembering her preferences. Creating an atmosphere of care and attention. He poured wine from a bottle she didn't recognize, something expensive judging by the label. I thought we'd try something special tonight. Evelyn watched as Daniel filled her glass first, then his own. His movements were precise, practiced. She noticed he drank from his glass immediately, as if to demonstrate its safety, while hers sat untouched beside her plate. This looks delicious, she said, picking up her fork but not yet taking a bite. Eat while it's hot, Daniel encouraged, settling into his own chair. You need to keep your strength up. The wire beneath her blouse felt warm against her skin, a small reminder that this conversation was being recorded. Kim's team was positioned around the house, listening and ready to intervene. But they needed evidence, clear, incriminating statements that would prove Daniel's intent. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Evelyn began. "About the psychiatrist and the guardianship." Daniel's fork paused midway to his mouth. "It's not something we need to decide tonight. But if my condition is as serious as you think, shouldn't we move quickly? Before I become incapable of participating in the decision?" "That's very mature of you, Evie. I'm proud of you for facing this honestly." Evelyn took a small sip of wine, letting it touch her lips but not swallowing. "How would it work? The guardianship, I mean." Daniel's expression softened into what looked like genuine sadness. "I'd be appointed as your legal guardian. That would give me authority to make medical and financial decisions on your behalf. All my assets would be transferred to you?" "Not transferred, managed. I'd become the trustee of your estate, responsible for using your money to provide for your care." The legal language was careful, designed to sound protective rather than predatory. But Evelyn understood what he was really describing: total control over her life and death, with no oversight or accountability. "What if something happened to you? Who would take care of me then?" Daniel's smile was warm and reassuring. "I'm not going anywhere, honey. I'll be with you until the end." The phrase, "until the end," hung between them like smoke. Evelyn realized that Daniel was telling her the truth, in his own twisted way. He would be with her until the end, which was planned for tonight. "I suppose I should eat this before it gets cold," Evelyn said, cutting a small piece of chicken. "Please do. You've been losing weight lately." Evelyn held the fork halfway to her mouth, studying the food more carefully. The sauce looked normal, but there was a slightly bitter smell she couldn't identify. "This seasoning is different from usual. I tried a new recipe. Do you like it?" Instead of answering, Evelyn set down her fork and reached for her wine glass. She held it up to the light as if admiring the color, but really checking for any unusual residue or cloudiness. "The wine tastes a little off," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's a different vintage. Sometimes new flavors take getting used to. Maybe I should stick to water tonight. I'm feeling a little lightheaded." "Are you? That could be another symptom we should mention to the doctor." Evelyn stood slowly, as if the movement required effort. "I think I'll get some fresh air. Maybe step out on the porch for a minute." "Why don't you sit back down? I'll open a window if you need air." The suggestion carried an undercurrent of command that made Evelyn's skin prickle. Daniel was no longer asking, he was directing. The performance of the caring husband was beginning to crack. "I'd prefer to go outside." Daniel stood as well, moving to block her path to the front door. "Evie, you're not thinking clearly. Sit down and finish your dinner." "I don't want any more dinner. You need to eat. The medication works better with food." Evelyn felt ice form in her veins. "What medication?" Daniel's expression shifted, the mask of concern sliding away to reveal something cold and predatory beneath. "The medication that's going to help you sleep." "I'm not taking any medication." "You already have. It was in the wine." The admission hit her like a physical blow. Evelyn's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice calm despite the violence of his actions. "Let go of me. In a few minutes, you're going to start feeling drowsy. Then confused. Then you'll lose consciousness. I'll call 911 and tell them you collapsed at dinner. By the time the paramedics arrive, it'll be too late." Evelyn tried to pull away, but Daniel's grip tightened. With his free hand, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. "This is just in case the wine isn't enough. Concentrated digitalis. A few drops under your tongue, and your heart will stop within minutes." "You're insane." Daniel's laugh was bitter and hollow. "I'm practical. Do you know how much money Linda and I have already spent setting up our new life? The forged documents, the travel arrangements, the bribes? We're committed, Evie. There's no going back. People will know what you did. People will know that a confused woman with dementia wandered away from her caring husband and suffered a tragic accident. Or maybe a medical emergency brought on by the stress of her deteriorating condition." Daniel's grip on her wrist was cutting off circulation, but Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. Kim's team was listening to every word. They would intervene soon. She just had to survive until they arrived. How long have you been planning this? Since Linda showed me your financial portfolio. Did you know you're worth more than most people make in a lifetime? All that money sitting in conservative investments, earning practically nothing. So you decided to steal it. I decided to put it to better use. Linda knows how to make money grow. In 5 years, we could triple your net worth. While I'm dead. Daniel's expression hardened. While you're at peace. No more confusion, no more fear, no more struggling to remember who you are. Evelyn felt the wire shift against her skin and prayed it was still transmitting clearly. Is that what happened to Linda's other boyfriends? Did they also find peace? Daniel's grip loosened slightly in surprise. What do you know about that? I know she's done this before. I know you're not the first man she's convinced to murder for money. Those were different situations, were they? Or are you just the latest in a series of men she's manipulated into thinking they're partners when they're really just tools? Daniel's face flushed with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that when this is over, Linda will disappear with the money, and you'll be left holding the evidence. The forged signatures, the fake medical records, the murder weapon all traced back to you. That's not how this works. Isn't it? Who benefits if you get caught and she doesn't? Who has experience covering her tracks while men take the blame? For the first time since their conversation began, Daniel looked uncertain. His grip on her wrist loosened as doubt crept into his expression. Linda loves me. Linda loves your usefulness, just like you loved mine. Daniel released her wrist and stepped backward, his hand moving to his pocket where the vial of digitalis waited. Enough talking. This ends now. Evelyn's hand found the panic button just as Daniel lunged toward her. She pressed it hard, feeling the small device activate beneath her fingers. The sound of breaking glass came from the kitchen. Kim's team smashing through the back door. Heavy footsteps pounded across the hardwood floor as voices shouted commands. Police. Hands where we can see them. Daniel spun toward the sound, the vial flying from his hand to shatter against the dining room wall. Clear liquid spread across the floor, forming a deadly puddle that reflected the overhead light. Kim appeared in the doorway first, weapon drawn, followed by 4 officers in tactical gear. Daniel raised his hand slowly, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and finally resignation. Daniel Parker, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, elder fraud, and forgery. As the officers moved to handcuff her husband of 34 years, Evelyn sank into a dining room chair and watched her old life end. The man she'd trusted with her heart, her home, her future, was being read his Miranda rights. While evidence of his plan to kill her dried on the wall behind him. Mrs. Parker? Kim's voice was gentle. Are you injured? I don't think so. Evelyn held up her wrist, which was already showing dark bruises from Daniel's grip. Just shaken. The wine he gave you, did you drink any of it? Just a sip. I didn't swallow it. Kim nodded to one of the officers, who carefully bagged the wine glass as evidence. We'll have it tested, but based on what we recorded, it was likely a sedative designed to incapacitate you. As Daniel was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Evelyn one final time. His expression wasn't anger or remorse, it was disappointment, as if she'd failed to play her part in a script he'd written. I was trying to take care of you, he said. Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. No, Daniel. You were trying to take care of yourself. The house felt enormous and strange after everyone left. Crime scene technicians had spent hours photographing evidence and collecting samples. The dining room table where she'd almost eaten her last meal was now tagged and processed as part of a murder scene. Evelyn sat alone in her living room, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of 34 years of marriage. Wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, books they'd read together on quiet Sunday mornings. All of it felt like archaeology, now relics from a civilization that had never really existed. Her phone rang. Margaret's name appeared on the screen. Evie? I just saw the news. Are you all right? I'm alive, Evelyn said, and realized it was the most honest answer she could give. I'm driving down. I'll be there in 3 hours. You don't need to. Yes, I do. You shouldn't be alone right now. After hanging up, Evelyn walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. This was her home now, not theirs, just hers. The thought was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. In Daniel's office, she found papers he'd been preparing to finalize power of attorney documents, medical directives, property transfers. All designed to erase her legal existence while maintaining the appearance of loving care. But mixed in with the fraudulent documents, she also found something unexpected: printouts of emails between Daniel and Linda dating back 18 months. The correspondence revealed the full scope of their planning, including detailed research into her family history, her father's estate, even her daily routines and medical appointments. They had studied her like scientists examining a lab specimen, looking for weaknesses they could exploit and assets they could steal. Reading their cold analysis of her vulnerabilities, her trust, her isolation, her desire to avoid being a burden felt like being dissected while still alive. But the emails also revealed Daniel's increasing desperation. Linda was pushing him to move faster, threatening to find another partner if he couldn't deliver results. Their relationship wasn't love, it was a business arrangement built on mutual greed and contempt for their victim. 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood in a courtroom as Daniel was sentenced to 25 years to life for attempted murder and conspiracy. Linda, arrested trying to board a plane to Costa Rica, received a similar sentence for her role in the plot. During the victim impact statement, Evelyn looked directly at her former husband and spoke words she'd rehearsed for days. "You didn't just try to kill my body, Daniel. You tried to kill my identity, my autonomy, my right to exist as a thinking, feeling person. You succeeded in murdering the woman I used to be, the one who trusted blindly and never questioned your motives. But you failed to kill the woman I've become." Daniel stared at his hands throughout her statement, never meeting her eyes. After the sentencing, Evelyn drove to the small cafe where she'd first met with Kim and Rebecca. This time, she wasn't seeking help or protection, she was planning her future. "What will you do now?" Rebecca asked. Evelyn thought about the question seriously. At 62, she was starting over, completely new identity as a single woman. New understanding of her own strength, new appreciation for the time she'd been given. "I think I'll travel," she said finally. "I've spent my whole adult life taking care of other people or being taken care of. Maybe it's time to take care of myself." "Where will you go?" "Everywhere Daniel and I never went. All the places he said were too dangerous or too expensive or too complicated for someone my age." Rebecca smiled. "That sounds like a wonderful revenge, living the life he tried to steal from you." 6 months later, Evelyn sent postcards from Rome, then Edinburgh, then Morocco. Each one carried the same message: still here, still fighting, still free. The house in Naperville was sold, with proceeds going partly to reimburse victims of elder fraud and partly to fund Evelyn's new adventures. She kept only what truly mattered: family photos, her father's watch, the quilt her mother had made by hand. Standing in the departure lounge at O'Hare International Airport, the same airport where she'd almost been murdered, Evelyn felt the full weight of everything she'd survived and everything she still had to experience. Her boarding pass read, "Destination Prague." She'd always wanted to see the city where her grandparents had been born, but Daniel had insisted it was too foreign, too difficult for tourists their age. As her flight was called, Evelyn gathered her carry-on bag and walked toward the gate. Each step felt like a small victory over the man who had tried to erase her future. The woman boarding that plane bore little resemblance to the frightened, confused person who had sat at her dining table, sorting Medicare papers and trusting her husband's lies. That woman was gone, murdered as surely as if Daniel's plot had succeeded. But the woman who survived, alert, angry, and absolutely determined to reclaim every day she'd been given, was just beginning to live. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for